This Wood Whisperer special presentation is brought to you by Titebond. They make glue. So let's talk about glue. It's a pretty massive topic and one that gets very confusing if you look at each individual product and discuss all of the different stats that make it what it is. So instead, I want to focus on making this like an FAQ, talking about different applications, different use cases, which glues I recommend, with the primary focus being the main ones that woodworkers know and love: Titebond Original, Titebond 2, and Titebond 3. And then we will reference some of the more specific glues as needed as we go through. Now, we also have a handy chart. I put this together. It's just a big spreadsheet that shows you pretty much all these woodworking glues and all of their properties if you really want to dig into the specifics. So which glue is best for simple interior projects? Well, just about the entire product line will work just fine, and certainly Titebond Original 2 and 3 will all work on interior projects. They're all non-toxic, feature water cleanup, have strong initial tack, and a 30-minute clamp time. And they all have a 2-year plus shelf life, so you're going to have to look at some of the other attributes to decide between these three. But to spoil the ending, generally speaking, Titebond 3 is going to be the strongest, the most water resistant, food safe glue. It's sort of the best all-around choice if you take price and throw that aside. So what if you're making kitchen items, cutting boards, things that will have food exposure? That one's pretty easy. You're going to be looking at Titebond 2 or Titebond 3. Both of them have water resistance, and both of them are FDA approved for indirect food contact. Now, what if you're building exterior projects, things that get water exposure? Well, Titebond 2 is water resistant, so light water exposure, that's perfectly fine. Titebond 3 is waterproof, so if you have a little bit more heavy water exposure, it's a good option for that. And also, you should consider their polyurethane glue. That is also one of their waterproof glues. Now, what if you need more assembly time and you're doing a complex project with lots of mortise and tenon joints? You just need as much working time as possible. So here's the rundown. Titebond Original, 4 to 6 minutes of open time. Titebond 2, 3 to 5 minutes. Titebond 3, 8 to 10 minutes. Titebond Polyurethane Glue, 30 minutes. Titebond Liquid Hide Glue, 10 minutes plus depending on conditions. And both of the Titebond Extend products are 15 minutes open time. Now keep in mind, if you're in a hot, dry climate, those numbers will go down. And if you're in a humid and low temperature area, the numbers can go up. So what if you're a winter woodworker and it's just a cold day in the shop? How low of a temperature can these glues work at? Generally speaking, Titebond 3 is going to be the best at 47 degrees. Most of the other glues are 50 to 55 degrees. So what if you're looking for the absolute strongest bond possible? Once again, Titebond 3, 4,000 psi. The other two, a little bit lower, 3,600 for Titebond Original and 3,750 for Titebond 2. Now the thing is though, realistically for most woodworkers, none of that matters. They are all stronger than the wood itself. They will all work just fine, and the differences between them, at least to me, are not significant enough to warrant using one or the other. But again, you're looking for the all-around best, that Titebond 3 is going to give it to you. So what if you need a fast drying glue? Well, first there's Quick and Thick. This one actually sets up twice as fast. It's incredibly thick so you don't get drips and runs. So it's good for those quick applications, things like molding, stuff like that. And then you can also consider their CA glues, cyanoacrylate. These are basically what we all know as super glue. They dry really fast. They come in several different viscosities, from thin to medium to thick, to the one I actually use the most often is gel formulation. And that's great for putting together jigs. Using, instead of a double-sided tape, you could use it with blue tape to stick parts together. Works great. So what if you need your glue line to be clear, dark, light, something specific? Well, I have taken a piece of walnut here and put a couple of beads of glue, of some of the most common ones, so you could see what the dried film color actually is. So let's go over them. This is Titebond Original. You got a little bit of translucency there, but it's mostly just yellowish colored. Titebond 2, definitely more of an amber yellow, and still a little bit of translucency. Titebond 3, quite a bit darker, really blends in nicely with walnut. I actually use Titebond 3 on walnut all the time. It looks pretty great. Hide glue is kind of a clear amber. You could see straight through into the wood beneath. Polyurethane glue is definitely a yellowish amber, a brighter color, but polyurethane glue also foams up a lot, so when you put a bead across a piece of wood like this, you see a lot of foam, and it kind of looks crystalline in a way. Next up, we have Titebond Extend, and that's clearly very white, off-white, cream color. Titebond Extend 2, that's the one with a little bit of water resistance, has a very, I don't know, like a milky gray look to it. And then Titebond Dark. This is one that's specifically formulated for dark species like walnut. Now, just as a quick test, I wanted to see if I could actually see the difference gluing light and dark woods together using 4 different glues. So let's take a look at the maple board first. This section has Titebond Original, and it really is about as good as you can get in terms of not seeing that glue line. As you go across, Titebond 2, that still looks pretty good too, no complaints there. Now, once we get to Titebond 3, things start to darken a little bit, and if you look really closely, you could see that glue line does get a little bit more toward the darker brown, blackish color. I do have a gap here. This is not necessarily the glue line, so much as I just didn't have enough clamping pressure, and in fact, I did have a clamp here and a clamp here, and that probably led to this little gap. Now, if that was filled with Titebond Original, or maybe Titebond 2, maybe it wouldn't be as noticeable. But we do have Titebond 3 and Titebond Dark, which definitely leads to a slightly darker line. So I will say on maple, it does make a difference which one you choose. Now on the walnut, I was really surprised by this. I'm having trouble seeing any difference across this entire joint. So here, of course, in the middle is where that joint lives. Original, 2, 3, and dark all look comparable to me. So I think the moral to the story here is if you have proper clamping pressure and really good joints with clean surfaces coming together, the glue line is just not as much of a factor in a dark wood like walnut. But the reality is most of us don't have absolutely perfect glue ups all the time. Think about a big tabletop. You're bound to have some slight gaps. So you have to ask yourself, if you do have one of those gaps, what's the color you want to see? And that's where targeting a specific color for a specific species of wood is probably a good idea. So what about gluing wet wood? And what I mean by that is not necessarily projects that are going outside, but wood that has a high moisture content. So let's say 10% or above. Well, the general series of glues that we usually work with, and even hide glue, are not real good candidates for wet wood. What I would recommend there is polyurethane glue. Polyurethane glue actually thrives in that kind of environment. Moisture is part of what activates the glue when you glue your 2 pieces together. So this is a no-brainer when it comes to wet material. So how about oily exotics? Right? Some exotic species will actually have oil on the surface, and the longer it sits, the more that oil builds up, and you go to glue things together, and glues like this don't really work so well. So one choice would be to go to a polyurethane glue. This doesn't necessarily care that there's a little bit of oil on the surface. But if you do want to use your standard Titebond Original 2 or 3, there is a way that you can use it. So first of all, you could take that oily exotic, and if it is freshly sanded or freshly planed, and you can put the glue on there right away, that should usually work. If it's been sitting around for a while, you could wipe it down. You can use something like denatured alcohol or acetone to wipe down this material, remove that surface oil, and this is just a small piece of teak. Good thing about both acetone and alcohol is they flash off and dry very quickly. Now once that's dry, if you work pretty quickly, you can get your glue on there and get that joint glued together before the surface oils have time to leach out to the surface. Now a lot of people like to pre-finish their projects, and that runs the risk of getting finished materials and stain onto things that will later receive glue. Well, the glues we know and love, generally speaking, they need raw wood in order to work. So if it's sealed by finish, it's not going to work that well. So a good solution for that, polyurethane glue. Polyurethane glue doesn't absorb as deep into the wood fibers and doesn't really have a problem binding to surfaces that are non-porous, right? So if the wood is somewhat sealed, polyurethane glue really isn't going to care. Pre-finishers, this might be something to consider. Now, I've actually referred to poly glue as a good answer for a number of these questions already, and why isn't polyurethane glue more popular? Well, a couple reasons. One is the shelf life. It goes bad fairly quickly. You have to be sure to get all the air out of the bottle, otherwise you're just replacing it all the time. It can be a little bit messy. It's kind of sticky. You don't want to get the stuff on your hands. And also, when you glue it together, it foams up. So here's a sample block that we put together, and you can see the squeeze out, which normally is just a quick wipe or a scrape with the chisel when you're using standard glues. This stuff is a gooey foam. So if you try to remove it while it's still gooey, it just makes more of a mess. And if you wait until it's fully cured, then you have to use a chisel to really scrape that stuff off of there. And that light, airy foam can also help push a joint apart. So you have to have good clamping pressure to make sure that that doesn't happen. So depending on, the pros and cons and how you weigh your options, polyurethane glue may or may not be a good choice for your work. Now, what if you're incredibly thrifty? I can tell you that Titebond 3 is the best choice, but if it's more expensive and you could get away with something else, why wouldn't you? So the pricing does vary, and I did my best to find current prices from reputable dealers, but shop around, you might find better prices. So on these big bottles here, Titebond Original is $5, Titebond 2, $7, Titebond 3, $9. The Titebond Extend varieties are also $9. Now when you get into the more specialized glues like hide glue and polyurethane glue, it's significantly more expensive. About $16 for the hide glue, and what would be $20 if you can get a full 16-ounce bottle of the polyurethane glue. So what if you're doing a project and repairability is a big factor? Maybe a chair or a musical instrument, things where repairs are not just if, but when. Hide glue is going to be your answer. Hide glue is one of the most reversible glues out there. With a little bit of heat and moisture, you could typically loosen up the joint enough to pull it apart. You can actually do your repair and then put the joint back together. So that's one of the big advantages of something like the liquid hide glue. What if you like to keep things simple? You only want one bottle of glue that does it all, and price isn't necessarily as much of a factor for the sake of convenience. Titebond 3, without a doubt. It's going to be the strongest. You get FDA approved indirect food contact, you get a lower working temperature, and then you also have more working time with this glue. So in general, the best all-around glue is definitely going to be Titebond 3. So now let's get to your questions about glue. Don Bullock asked, what is the difference between open time and assembly time? And you'll see both of those referenced in literature about glues. Now, open time just refers to, let's use it in context of a project. You put glue on the mortise, you put glue on the tenon. How much time do you have to get those pieces together before the glue starts to set up? That's your open time. If you exceed the open time, you go to put that joint together and the glue and the parts just aren't going to really mate very well because it's already started to skin up a little bit. So that's how much time you have to get this thing together. Now, once it's together, you're kind of robbing it of air to some extent, right? You put that tenon into the mortise, it's now a closed joint. And how much more time do you have to work with it? Well, that's where we talk about the assembly time, right? So total assembly time includes that initial open time, plus how much time you have to maneuver the joint once the joint is together. Now the next question is from Peter Skarschmidt. I think that's how you pronounce that. He wants to know what the best ways are to clean up glue squeeze out. Well, this kind of depends on the glue, and it also depends on which stage of the process of that squeeze out drying that we're in. So here I've got an example of just 2 pieces of cherry freshly glued with standard stuff. It could be any one of these, Titebond Original, 2, 3, Extend, whichever. If it's still wet like this, one way to clean it up, not my favorite way, but one way is to simply wipe it away. Then get a damp cloth. Since it is water-based, it's very easy to remove the rest of that glue. That will work, but if you are doing a stain project or something, you may wind up driving some of that glue down into the wood fibers. So if you're going to do this, you definitely want to scrape or sand this surface afterwards to make sure there's no glue in those pores. Now my preferred way to remove this type of glue is to let it set up a little bit. It could be anywhere from 10 minutes to 20 minutes depending on your conditions. Just to the point that it's skinned over, so I can come through with a chisel or a scraper, or even a putty knife, and remove the glue without it bursting and going all over the place. Now you might get a little bit spilling out depending on how long you wait, but that you could just grab with a damp rag. And this kind of contains the squeeze out, keeps it focused in a small area. Then you can clean off the joint, and you're not spreading it all over the place. Still, you're going to want to sand or scrape this surface before you put the finish on. Now, if the glue is already set up and dry, you have a couple of options. First of all, you could take a nice sharp chisel and run that along the surface. You do run the risk of gouging your material, so you have to be careful if you use this method. You can also use a card scraper or a cabinet scraper. Or you can simply sand the surface. Now for hide glue, fortunately, we're talking water cleanup for that as well. So just a moist rag or paper towel, wipe the excess away. This is one that I would not let skin over because it just kind of gets really sticky as it tacks up. And then once it dries, I would give it a light sanding or a scrape. And once the hide glue is dry, it's pretty hard and brittle. This is not fully cured. I can kind of still dent it. with my finger. So normally you can just kind of get up under there and it just snaps right up. But this is just a little bit less cured than it would normally be. But you can see it scrapes away pretty easily and cleanly. But again, chisel, scraper, or sanding. So if you're using polyurethane and you want to remove the glue while it's wet, you need something with a little more kick than water. Mineral spirits or acetone will work just fine. So I got a paper towel with some mineral spirits on it, and then we could wipe away this excess glue. Now once this polyurethane glue dries, you're really left with the same three options: sand, scrape, or use a chisel. David Teal wants to know, can Titebond glues be dyed? Well, these water-based ones certainly can. Let me show you. Put a little bit in here, and as long as you use a water-based dye, a water-soluble dye, if it's powder, put it in a little bit of water first. I'll put 1 drop of this trans tint dark brown, give it a good mix, and just like that, I've got brown glue. Mike Zellman wants to know, how do you keep these clever little caps clean? They inevitably seem to always fill up and have dried glue in there. So the number one thing you can do to keep this clean is to use it properly. That means open it when you need it, and as soon as you're done, close it. It's basically got this little fin, this little paddle in there that pushes out through the opening and clears it. Now you'll always have this little film after you're done, and the little film on there just gets popped off before the next use. So use your fingernail, clear that out, and then you should be able to just pop it right back up. And now it's ready to use again. Now, if you're super obsessed with cleanliness, you can always take this cap off after every use, take it to the sink and wash it out, and then pop it back on. That's a surefire way to make sure it always stays clean. I don't think most of us are going to do that. So eventually, in spite of your best efforts to keep it clean, you're going to end up with some dried gook in there that you need to clean out. So the best thing you could do, take this into a cup of hot water, drop it in there, let it soften the glue, and then just get a skinny screwdriver, scrape it out, and usually it pulls it out in just like one big booger. And it clears it out just fine, and then you could reuse it. And John Sexton asked, if the glue is clumpy or stringy, is it still usable? Well, here's what it comes down to. If you see stringiness to it, or Titebond 2, if it turns into an orange sort of gelatinous material, that's a bad sign. That's usually a sign that you need to dump it and get some new glue. But if it just thickens up and maybe there's a couple of clumps in there, you can actually shake it vigorously. You can even add a little bit of water, no more than like 5%, just a little bit of water to thin it out, and it should still be usable. Generally speaking, the shelf life on these guys is 2 years plus, as long as it's not exposed to extreme temperatures. And I've gotten, at least 2 years out of some bottles of glue. So as you can see, there's a wide variety of glues for all types of situations, all types of materials, and you could really pick and choose what you need, but most of us are probably going to be just happy with the original 2 or 3 as the glue that we stock up on, right? And out of those 3 is probably going to be the go-to for most people. Right now, be sure to refer to the chart that we have on our website because there's a lot more details and a lot of things we don't have time to cover here today if you want to get into the real nitty-gritty of all these different glues. Thanks for watching and good luck gluing your projects.